King Solomon is an intriguing figure because the Bible makes so many claims about him, controlling vast amounts of territory.
From the time of Solomon, we have very detailed account of his building activities in Jerusalem. The palace is described in a detailed way, and then the temple is described in 3 chapters.
The Babylonians invaded Jerusalem and sacked Solomon's temple.
When the Temple of Solomon was destroyed in 586 BCE, all the temple treasures were lost to history.
A king who commanded demons, a temple built by supernatural forces, an ancient manuscript so dangerous it was deliberately scattered across continents and hidden for millennia.
Of all the kings in the Old Testament, the most legendary is Solomon.
Until now. Grok AI, one of the most advanced artificial intelligence systems ever created, has done something scholars said was impossible. It cracked the code of King Solomon's forbidden grimoire, a text that religious authorities spent 2,000 years trying to bury. And what it revealed isn't just shocking, it's paradigm-shattering.
This is a king blessed with unparalleled wisdom and power. This is the man who bent demons to his will. This is Pantheon mythology, and this is Solomon.
This isn't about dusty legends or biblical bedtime stories. This is about a king who possessed knowledge so powerful, so dangerous, that generations of scribes deliberately sabotaged their own manuscripts to prevent it from spreading. Knowledge about the invisible architecture of reality, about entities that exist in dimensions we can't perceive, about techniques that, if real, could fundamentally change everything we understand about consciousness, power, and the universe itself.
He's the wiser, he has many wives than anybody else, he built everything, he has international connection, he's presented as the head of a huge empire.
What you're about to discover will make you question everything. Because if even a fraction of this is true, then history isn't what we thought it was. Reality isn't what we think it is. And somewhere, hidden in plain sight, lies a blueprint for accessing powers that were never meant for human hands.
You can take a piece of that and date it.
Are you ready? Because once you hear this, there's no going back. The impossible reconstruction, how Grok AI solved a 3,000-year-old puzzle. For centuries, scholars hunting for the complete teachings of King Solomon faced an impossible maze. Fragments scattered across continents. Passages written in Hebrew echoing mysteriously in ancient Greek papyri. Aramaic marginalia matching Latin footnotes added centuries later. Damaged lines from locked monastery vaults syncing perfectly with medieval ciphers that were supposedly unrelated. Everyone assumed these were separate works, cousins of the same mythic tradition, perhaps, but distinct texts created by different authors in different eras. The Testament of Solomon, sections of the Lesser Key, obscure magical papyri, half-legible marginal notes, monastic archives that hadn't been opened in generations. Then Grok AI did something extraordinary. Line by line, symbol by symbol, it started linking obscure phrases and stylistic fingerprints together. It unraveled patterns across Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, Latin, Syriac, medieval ciphers, and even the substitution codes scribes used to hide perilous passages. It recognized matching writing styles across centuries. It detected encrypted passages that aligned with damaged lines from supposedly unrelated texts. It reconstructed missing sections using linguistic probability models trained on 10,000 years of written human culture. In short, Grok solved a puzzle by doing what humans simply aren't built to do. And then came the breakthrough that changed everything. These weren't separate texts at all. According to Grok's cross-linguistic reconstruction, every single fragment belonged to one original manuscript, a single book written by Solomon himself. A book deliberately dismantled, scattered, encrypted, and hidden because of what it contained. The title wasn't metaphorical. It was called Forbidden. But here's the question that should terrify you. Why would anyone go through such extraordinary effort to hide a book unless what it revealed was genuinely dangerous?
The Bible says that Solomon was active in several projects of construction in Jerusalem, maybe in the vicinity, some other places, and then it says, in Hatzor and Megiddo and Giza.
The ring that should never have existed. Most people know Solomon as the wise king who built the first temple. Few know the impossibility of that project for the ancient world. The sheer scale of the stones, the precision of the architecture, the materials imported from distant lands. None of it should have been achievable with Bronze Age technology. But according to Grok's translation, Solomon didn't rely on human labor alone. He used supernatural entities, demons, to quarry, transport, and shape the stone. Essentially, he enslaved beings from another dimension to construct the holiest building in ancient Israel. And it all began with a ring that arrived from heaven itself. The forbidden manuscript describes a crisis during the early construction of the temple. By day, everything looked normal. Workers carving stone, priests offering blessings, architects laying out sacred blueprints. But when night fell, something else took over. A demon named Ornius slipped into the construction site like a silent thief, undoing progress one shift at a time. Tools vanished, stones mysteriously shifted, foundations cracked overnight. Workers reported bruises, whispers, shadows that felt alive. Worst of all, a young laborer, barely more than a boy, was being targeted directly. Ornius drained his strength, stole half his pay, and in the creepiest detail the text insists on, fed on the boy's vitality through his right thumb. By the time word reached Solomon, his crew was terrified. No amount of wisdom, diplomacy, or royal command could stop something they couldn't see. So the king did the only thing he believed would work. He prayed. The response was immediate and terrifying. The forbidden manuscript describes the archangel Michael appearing in a vision so intense that Solomon nearly collapsed. No soft wings, no gentle glow. The description is almost violent. Radiance like molten metal, a voice like rolling thunder, and a presence that felt as heavy as a storm pressing against stone. In Michael's hand, a small golden ring engraved with a symbol that didn't match any known alphabet. It pulsed with light, as if something inside it was alive. "Take this ring, Solomon, son of David," the archangel commanded. "Wear it, and thou shalt bind all demons, and by their labor the temple shall rise." A divine gift, yes, but one that came with the faintest hint of warning, like a contract signed without reading the fine print. When Solomon woke, the ring was real, glittering in his palm, and he wasted no time testing it. He confronted Ornius directly, raising the ring and speaking the demon's true name. Instantly, the creature materialized, yanked into view as if on a celestial chain. Ornius, this entity that had terrorized his workers for weeks, fell to its knees, powerless. Solomon didn't even seem afraid. He was stunned by how absolute the ring's authority was. And then he did something no one expected, something that feels half brilliant, half reckless. He ordered Ornius to take the ring and use it to bind another demon. This is where the story jumps from supernatural to downright strategic. Solomon built a chain of command using demons themselves, like a dark divine pyramid scheme. Each bound demon had to capture another, and another, until Solomon stood before 72 spirits, each forced to reveal its name, function, weaknesses, the angel that ruled over it, and even the sigil that would forever bind it to the king's will. Think about that for a moment. Solomon didn't just control demons, he turned them into his recruitment team. How insane is that?
He felt that he had discovered evidence of Solomon's mines.
The empire behind the veil. 72 spirits and their terrifying hierarchy. For most people, the word demon conjures images of chaotic beings, shapeless horrors lurking in shadows, each acting on impulse or malice. But according to the forbidden manuscript, Solomon didn't encounter chaos at all. He encountered order, structure, a stunningly organized civilization operating just outside human perception. The deeper Solomon dug, the more the invisible realm began to look less like a swarm of monsters and more like a government with departments, ranks, and job titles. An entire empire hidden behind the veil. The manuscript lays it out clearly. The 72 spirits weren't a mob. They were a hierarchy, arranged with almost military precision. At the top were kings, beings with enormous authority and the power to command entire regions of the unseen world. Beneath them were dukes, princes, presidents, marquises, earls, and finally knights, each rank responsible for legions of lesser spirits. And these legions weren't vague poetic descriptions. Solomon recorded the numbers meticulously. Some kings commanded 200 legions, others controlled 30 or 66. Even minor spirits had squads under their authority. This wasn't mythology. It read like census data. Let that sink in. A 3,000-year-old text contains what appears to be a bureaucratic org chart of hell. Who does that? Some of the commanders were already known from scraps of occult lore. Others emerged for the first time through Grok's translation of damaged pages. Baal appears first in the grimoire, one of the great kings, described with 3 heads, a man, a toad, and a cat. The Forbidden Book claims he can grant invisibility and teach strategy. Solomon supposedly relied on Baal during tense diplomatic negotiations, using his insights to anticipate betrayals before they occurred. Imagine having a supernatural advisor whispering the truth behind every political smile. Horus, by contrast, is no warlord, but an artist. A musician of the celestial spheres, the text says. When he speaks, flames dance around him like living notes. He teaches rhetoric, poetry, and the secret harmonies woven into creation. Solomon allegedly consulted him to understand how sound and vibration could influence stone. Some say this is how the acoustics of the temple became legendary. Ammon appears as a wolf with a serpent's tail, transforming into a man upon command. But his real significance lies in what he knows. The text calls him the keeper of forgotten truths, the living library of everything humans once knew and then lost. Solomon interrogated him like a scholar chasing ancient history before it vanished forever. And then there is Glaciolabalus, a spirit described as both genius and bloodshed. A creature who can teach any art or science instantly, but delights in stirring conflict. Using his knowledge was like handling an intellectual grenade. Still, Solomon took the risk, extracting insights into metallurgy, military strategy, and oddly enough, the psychology of crowds. Grok's translation even surfaced names not found in any surviving tradition, demons documented only in the burnt, crumbling corners of the manuscript. These spirits revealed knowledge of star patterns, energy currents in the earth, and mechanisms of the human mind. Details so precise that modern scholars are still trying to make sense of them. Here's what's unsettling. Solomon didn't just command these beings, he interviewed them. He cataloged them. He treated them like a researcher documenting a newly discovered civilization. His notes read like meticulous field reports, detailing each entity's realm, desert winds, deep waters, ruined cities, even the stars, their astrological ties, vulnerabilities to metals, herbs, incantations, or specific sounds, their expertise in medicine, architecture, politics, weather, warfare, music, and mathematics. He wasn't being mystical, he was being scientific.
That it is built according to the same plan that the temple in Jerusalem, the Solomonic temple, was built. What the Bible is telling us, we can now see physically in archaeology.
What the demons told Solomon about reality itself. Perhaps the most jaw-dropping revelation in Grok's translation wasn't about magic rituals or Solomon's legendary ring. The real shock came from what the demons claimed about existence itself. According to the forbidden passages, the demons told Solomon something humanity wouldn't seriously consider until thousands of years later. Reality isn't a single flat plane. It's layered. They described existence as a stack of dimensions, each vibrating at different frequencies, like strings on an unseen cosmic instrument. The physical world, the one humans cling to as real, is actually the slowest, heaviest, densest vibration of them all. The spiritual realms? Faster, finer, less constrained. And yet, every layer overlaps in the same space, like radio stations broadcasting together. You only hear the one your receiver is tuned to. Casually, as if discussing the weather, the demons explained that angels, demons, elemental spirits, and even strange unnamed beings inhabit these higher vibrational layers. Not metaphors, not symbols. Actual realms filled with entities that move through reality the way fish glide through water. Does that sound familiar? Because modern physicists talk about extra dimensions, string theory, and parallel universes using eerily similar language. And they only started seriously exploring these concepts in the last century. Here's where it gets unnervingly specific. The text describes places where the boundary between worlds becomes thin, geographic pressure points where the dimensions sit so close that contact becomes possible. Certain times of year, planetary alignments and ritual conditions can weaken the barrier even further. When all three align, the book suggests, the veil practically trembles. These weren't random ideas, they were coordinates, instructions, warnings, and Solomon, being Solomon, didn't ignore them. He used them. The grimoire paints a picture of a king obsessed not with power, but with understanding. He asked demons to describe the physics of their realms, how movement works in a dimension without time, how form behaves where matter doesn't exist, how communication happens without words. The demons responded with what they called laws of the unseen, metaphysical principles that humans had never recorded. Using this forbidden knowledge, Solomon attempted something audacious even by today's standards. He tried to map the entire universe, including the dimensions humans cannot normally perceive. And here's where things get wild. Grok's translation suggests that Solomon's temple wasn't merely a religious structure. It was a precision-engineered portal complex built on a location where the dimensional fabric was already naturally thin. According to the demons, the measurements of the temple, the materials used, the layout of the chambers, even the sequence of rituals performed inside, all were designed to stabilize contact between the physical world and the higher realms. The Holy of Holies, the most sacred chamber, played a dual role. Yes, it housed the Ark of the Covenant.
If the Ark of the Covenant had been brought to Rome, unique object, which remember was supposed to have awesome power, apart from the fact that it was beautiful to look at and that God was supposed to live within those two cherubim on the top.
But the text claims it also functioned as an anchor point, a place where spiritual and physical vibrations align so closely that a prepared human could cross the threshold without being torn apart by the energy.
It could also unleash incredible power.
Suddenly, it makes sense why only the high priest could enter, and only once a year. To everyone else, the concentrated spiritual energy would have been mentally shattering. Think about what this means. If this is true, then Solomon's temple wasn't just symbolically holy, it was functionally operational, a kind of ancient dimensional gateway disguised as a house of worship. In the demon's description, the Ark of the Covenant wasn't simply symbolic either. It was functional. Every detail, its dimensions, its materials, the objects contained inside, served a purpose.
It has long been believed that the Ark of the Covenant had some type of electromagnetic energy A power that is not supernatural or spiritual in nature, but very much technological.
The Ark was essentially a dimensional stabilizer, a device designed to keep the veil from collapsing during rituals. The forbidden text suggests that its power wasn't metaphorical. It was technological in a way ancient humans didn't know how to explain. This is where the forbidden knowledge becomes explosive. The demons told Solomon that humans are naturally multidimensional beings. Our consciousness doesn't stop at the skull. It extends into other realms. We just don't notice it because we're never taught how to look. Dreams, intuition, that sudden feeling of being watched. According to the grimoire, these are tiny moments when the mind accidentally brushes against another layer of reality. Solomon, through training and guidance, learned to do this on purpose. He developed what the demons called spirit sight, the ability to see beings across dimensions, perceive energies, and interact with spiritual entities as clearly as he interacted with people in his court. The text describes it not as a blessing, but as a skill, learnable, trainable, dangerous. And here's the terrifying part. If Solomon could learn it, theoretically, so could anyone else.
But the building was still standing in Jerusalem, and people were able to look at it. But the original structure, I'm sure it was from the time of Solomon.
The truth they tried to bury. Grok's translation didn't just uncover Solomon's forbidden teachings. It exposed a second, quieter story hiding in the spaces between the lines. As researchers dug deeper, they began noticing something strange. Tiny handwriting, nervous scribbles, and frantic warnings tucked into the margins by the monks and scholars who copied the text across the centuries. It turns out the grimoire wasn't merely preserved. It was handled, edited, censored, feared, and occasionally sabotaged by the very people tasked with protecting it. Imagine being a medieval scribe, alone in a dim stone chamber, copying a manuscript that casually explains how a human king commanded demons and mapped unseen dimensions. You'd leave a few nervous notes, too. Some scribes even altered the text intentionally, a demon name quietly swapped for a harmless symbol, a ritual step rearranged, an entire paragraph curved around with a slash, and the note omitted for safety. They weren't trying to destroy the grimoire. They were trying to defang it. The real crisis came when church officials began to understand what the text implied. The grimoire didn't claim that Solomon's power came from rare divine favor. It laid out procedures, seals, incantations, conditions, repeatable techniques that suggested magic wasn't a miracle. It was a method. And that was a nightmare for the early church. Because if a king could command demons through a reproducible process, then logically, any trained human could. If the spiritual world could be accessed by knowledge rather than divine approval, then priests weren't the gatekeepers anymore. If reality itself could be bent, navigated, or crossed using techniques that bypassed the church, the entire structure of religious authority started to wobble. The danger wasn't that Solomon was lying. The danger was that he might have been telling the truth. Now you might think, okay, then why not burn the book and be done with it? They tried, but the grimoire kept slipping through their fingers. For scholars, especially those trained in philosophy, astronomy, and proto-science, the text was simply too valuable. It contained insights on cosmology, psychology, and metaphysics that were centuries ahead of their time. Even theologians recognized its significance. Solomon wasn't a fringe figure. He was a biblical king. Destroying his writings outright would have raised uncomfortable questions. So instead of burning the book, they buried it in plain sight. Monasteries developed coded cataloging systems, disguising the grimoire under titles like agricultural notes or miscellaneous wisdom. Only select scholars were allowed to handle it, and even fewer were allowed to actually read it. The knowledge became both preserved and imprisoned, a paradox that lasted nearly 2 millennia. Grok's analysis uncovered a deliberate multi-level censorship strategy that evolved over centuries. Level 1. Textual manipulation. Entire sections rewritten repeatedly, each generation softening dangerous passages a little more. Demon names replaced with titles, symbols, or vague euphemisms to prevent accidental invocation. Level 2. Symbol corruption. Magical seals and sigils intentionally drawn wrong, mirrored, rotated, or given missing lines. Tiny distortions, but enough to render rituals ineffective. Level 3. Chronological disruption. Events rearranged to break the continuity of Solomon's training methods, making the system harder to reconstruct. Despite the Church's best efforts, the suppression was never perfect, because knowledge, especially forbidden knowledge, has a way of sneaking out the back door. Some monks made personal copies. Jewish mystics encoded parts into early Kabbalistic tradition. Islamic scholars, regarding Solomon as the prophet Suleiman, preserved surprisingly intact versions of certain passages. Alchemists smuggled fragments across Europe. And eventually, the printing press turned secrecy into a losing battle. When texts like the Lesser Key of Solomon appeared in the 1600s, the genie was officially out of the bottle. The Church tried censorship, bans, and public warnings. But it was too late. Solomon's system had re-entered the world.
Archaeological evidence indicates that the one who commissioned and oversaw this construction was King Solomon.
Solomon's hidden legacy, how the Forbidden Book shaped modern occultism. When people hear forbidden grimoire, they usually imagine dusty ruins, ancient kings, and long-dead rituals. But Solomon's book? That thing never stayed dead. It leaked through history like a stubborn ghost, reshaped, renamed, reinterpreted, until it quietly embedded itself into the foundations of modern occultism, esoteric lodges, mystical movements, and even philosophical systems that don't realize they're carrying Solomonic DNA. If you look closely, you'll see King Solomon's fingerprints everywhere. Let's start with the most famous secret society of all, the Freemasons. Now, Freemasonry doesn't summon demons or wave Solomonic seals around. It's not that kind of club. But its entire structure is built on Solomon's temple, both literally and symbolically. In Masonic ritual, members aren't just men in aprons. They are allegorical builders working under Solomon himself. Every degree, every tool, every lesson is framed around constructing the inner temple, modeled after the legendary one Solomon built. To the Masons, Solomon isn't just a historical king. He's the archetype of hidden wisdom, the perfect philosopher-architect. Their idea that spiritual growth resembles architectural craftsmanship, straight out of ancient Solomonic philosophy. They transformed his temple into a universal metaphor for self-improvement. Solomon became their mythic foreman, long after the stones of his actual temple turned to dust. If Freemasonry borrowed Solomon's symbolism, the ceremonial magic tradition borrowed his methods, and sometimes not even subtly. Organizations like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn didn't just reference Solomonic teachings, they built entire ritual systems around them. Solomonic seals, demon and angel hierarchies, invocation and evocation structures, and protective circles modeled on Solomonic diagrams. When Golden Dawn adepts performed ceremonial rites to summon archangels or command spiritual intelligences, they weren't being original. They were practicing versions of techniques Solomon allegedly perfected 3,000 years before. Modern ceremonial magic, from the Lamigutan to contemporary occult lodges, still uses Solomonic frameworks. Even when the names changed and the rituals evolved, the DNA stayed the same. Pick up any serious occult manual from the last 300 years, and you'll notice something uncanny. The diagrams look familiar. Circles, sigils, planetary correspondences, angelic names, astrological charts. They all echo patterns found in Solomon's grimoire. Solomon didn't just influence magic, he defined its geometry. The idea that each spirit corresponds to a planet, the idea that seals encode metaphysical contracts, the idea that sacred names alter spiritual resonance. All of these flow from the Solomonic current. Even many New Age systems, astrology-based rituals, energy work, planetary invocations, trace their roots back to the king who cataloged demons like a librarian organizing cosmic secrets. Of all traditions, Kabbalah may contain the clearest philosophical echoes of Solomon's teachings.
It's like exactly from the time of King David and Solomon. There is no question about that.
Though Kabbalah evolved independently over centuries, it shares conceptual parallels with the revelations in the Forbidden Book. A multi-layered reality, spiritual realms stacked like ladders, angelic names with specific functions, the idea of accessing divine power through precise speech and symbolic architecture representing invisible worlds. The Tree of Life, mapping 10 interconnected realms, reflects the same cosmological structure Solomon recorded when demons described layered dimensions, vibrating at different frequencies. Modern witchcraft and neo-pagan practices also carry pieces of Solomonic technique, often without realizing their origin. Circle casting mirrors, the protective circles Solomon used during summoning and drawing sigils for energy, protection, or manifestation, echoes Solomonic seal work. A practitioner in a modern coven might think they're using contemporary witchcraft, but many of the tools on their altar would feel surprisingly familiar to an ancient scribe of Solomon's court. Beyond magic, there's another layer of legacy: interpretation. Solomon's grimoire wasn't just a manual for commanding spirits, it was also a psychological map. Ritual structure, symbolic architecture, and encoded metaphors shaped how people understood the mind long before psychology existed. When occultists talk about inner demons, shadow work, or building the inner temple, they're walking paths carved by Solomonic philosophy. His hidden teachings form the backbone of a worldview where symbols act as mental technologies, rituals shape consciousness, architecture mirrors the cosmos, and the human mind is layered, complex, and multidimensional. Modern mysticism still leans heavily on these ideas. And yet, even after influencing centuries of traditions, societies, and magical systems, one question refuses to die. Did Solomon truly command real entities? Or did later generations weave myth and metaphor into something much stranger?
If the text is later by several centuries, there's big question mark whether it really reflects the reality of the time of King Solomon or, to differ, the reality of the time of the authors.
Where myth, magic, and history collide. For all the excitement stirred by this newly decoded version of Solomon's life, there's still a loud crowd calling it pure fiction. And honestly, you can't blame them. When you start reading some of these stories, things get weird fast. One of the clearest Christian threads woven through the text shows up during Solomon's confrontation with the demon Ephippas. While the demon is forced to help build the temple, Solomon asks him a simple question: which angel defeats you? Ephippas' answer sounds like a prophecy ripped straight out of the New Testament. He says his power can only be broken by a man who will be born of a virgin and later executed on a cross by the Jews. It's a wild moment, almost like the story stops and whispers, "Yes, you're reading a grimoire, but a gospel just slipped in." Greek influence shows up too, and not subtly. At one point, Solomon encounters 7 demons who appear as sisters. They introduce themselves as cosmic beings who dwell among the stars and occasionally descend from Mount Olympus. Their description mirrors the Pleiades, the legendary 7 sisters of Greek mythology, complete with their astrological symbolism. Imagine a Hebrew king interviewing astral beings who also claim prime real estate in Greek mythology. Then there's Abizuth, a limbless female demon with wild, tangled hair covering her head like a storm cloud. If she sounds suspiciously familiar, that's because many scholars argue she's essentially Medusa in disguise, or at least a cousin from the Gorgon family tree. Another demon, Onoskelis, pushes the Greek connection even further. While being interrogated at the temple, she casually mentions that she can shapeshift into 3 forms, one of which is the Titan Kronos himself. And she doesn't stop there. Onoskelis also appears as a triple-faced woman resembling Hecate, the Greek goddess of magic, crossroads, and moonlit mysteries. Unsurprisingly, Onoskelis is astrologically tied to the sphere of the moon, making her one of the text's more bizarre and cosmically confusing characters. And it's not just Greek mythology crashing this party. The Babylonian Talmud recounts a similar tale where Solomon enslaves Asmodeus, a demon prince, to help with the temple's construction, an encounter that doesn't end well for Solomon. Asmodeus eventually tricks the king, throws him off the throne for a while, and causes a royal identity crisis that later stories love retelling. Across Solomon's encounters, you find demons from Greek, Egyptian, Jewish, Christian, and even early Arabic traditions. The text is basically a supernatural United Nations meeting, except most of the delegates are monstrous. Solomon interviews dozens of these beings, and some are straight-up grotesque. There's even one demon who appears without a head, which raises a lot of questions, starting with, how exactly did it talk to him? Sexual demons show up too. Asmodeus, famous from the Book of Tobit, appears as expected. Then there's Obezuth, a female demon tied to the deaths of newborns and widely considered a relative of Lilith. Some of these entities are known from other ancient writings, but many are unique to this text, making Solomon's demon catalog one of the most eclectic in antiquity. One demon, Abazethebu, even takes credit for hardening Pharaoh's heart in the Book of Exodus. According to him, God wasn't behind it. He was. Now, when it comes to the history of the Testament of Solomon, scholars can't seem to agree on anything except that it's complicated. Estimates for its creation range anywhere from the 1st century AD to the High Middle Ages. Some argue the text leans heavily Jewish in origin. Others say a Christian writer with Greek roots must have stitched it together. Mid-20th century scholars believed it reflected the Judaism of the 1st century, and that much of the material might be far older than the manuscript itself. But later researchers challenged that view, pointing to the wide range of manuscripts, each altered by a different scribe over different centuries. When you add in the magical terminology, astrological references, and theological mashups, the only safe conclusion is this: the author is unknown, the text evolved, and no single culture can claim full ownership. This brings us to the real takeaway, especially now that Grok AI has reconstructed a unified version of the manuscript. The Testament of Solomon isn't a simple religious text. It's a fusion of cultures, beliefs, and mythologies stretching across continents and centuries. It's a supernatural scrapbook created by many hands, each adding their culture's own demons, gods, and cosmology. Some stories might trace back to authentic ancient traditions, others may be literary embellishments, and some might reflect magical practices that have long disappeared. But when you read it all together, cleaned, decoded, and restructured, you see something scholars never fully captured: a worldview where magic, religion, and mythology weren't separated. They were blended, interchangeable, normal.
She discovered an ancient structure near Jerusalem. She turned to the Bible to help explain what she found.
And she learned that this new discovery supports the biblical accounts of King David and his son Solomon.
The question that haunts us. And that's where the true power of Grok's translation lies. If even a fraction of this reconstructed grimoire reflects real ancient knowledge, then it doesn't just reshape our understanding of King Solomon. It challenges everything we think we know about the ancient world and the unseen forces those people believed they were fighting. Should this knowledge remain buried? Or is modern civilization finally ready to confront what Solomon knew 3,000 years ago? Because here's the thing. Grok didn't just translate words. It reconstructed a system, a methodology, a blueprint. And blueprints can be followed. So I have to ask you, if this knowledge is real, if there truly are dimensions beyond our perception, entities with their own hierarchies and techniques for accessing them, should we explore it? Or should some doors remain closed? The Church spent 2 millennia trying to answer that question. They chose to hide it, censor it, fragment it. But now it's out, reconstructed, accessible. What would you do with it? Would you dare to test Solomon's methods? Or does the very idea terrify you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, do you think Solomon really commanded demons? Or is this the greatest mythological mashup in history? Do you believe Grok AI has truly unlocked something dangerous? Or is this just ancient fiction getting a digital upgrade? Hit that like button if this story made you question reality, even just a little. Subscribe, because we're diving deeper into forbidden knowledge, AI breakthroughs, and mysteries that refuse to stay buried. Thanks for watching, and remember, some books were hidden for a reason. The question is, was it to protect us or to control us? Until next time.